Hello everyone, in this video we are going to talk about special right triangles. The first special right triangle is 45, 45, 90 degrees that we are talking about. The second one is going to be 30, 60, 90 degrees triangles. So about the properties of 45, 45, 90 degrees triangle, this question is going to give us what properties we have once we solve it. So it says if the leg of a 45, 45, 90 right triangle is x units, so they are x units, the legs are x units, show that the hypotenuse is x radical 2 units. So on the figure everything is given, but we need to show it. So remember what kind of equation we have when we have a right triangle. We have the Pythagorean theorem. That means a squared plus b squared equals c squared. This is what we need to show. So since right triangles satisfy Pythagorean theorem, this must be, sorry, not x radical 2, c squared. This must be a true statement for this triangle. Now let's plug in what we have. For a, we have x, we are going to square that. For the side b, we have another x, we are going to square this. And we are going to see if it is equal to square of x radical 2. Now the left hand side is 1x squared plus 1x squared. We have 2x squared. You're gonna see if what we have on the right hand side is the same as 2x squared. So right hand side of the equation can be separated. We can write it as x squared times radical 2 squared. I separated x and radical 2 and then squared them separately. So let's play with the numbers and terms on the right hand side. X squared stays the same. Now what about radical 2 squared? This means time radical 2 by itself. So if you use your calculator, you will see it'll give you 2. So left hand side was already 2x squared, and we just figured out that the right hand side is 2 times x squared as well. So they are equal to each other. It was a true statement. That means when we have a right triangle, isosceles right triangle, if the legs are x units, the hypotenuse becomes x radical 2. So whatever number we have for the legs, if we are looking for the hypotenuse, we are going to time it by radical 2. So we are going to talk about it in the second example. Let's check it out. In a 45, 45, 90 degrees right triangle, the hypotenuse is radical 2 times the leg. If the hypotenuse is 6 units, find the length of each leg. So let's just plot this right triangle first. It says the hypotenuse is 6 units. And I know that this is a 45, 45, 90 degrees triangle. It's going to become an isosceles right triangle. That means the legs are going to be the same. So let's say one of them is A. The other one is going to be the same. So what we know is if we take one of these legs and then time it by radical 2, we get the value of hypotenuse. This is what it says right here, and this is what we figured out in the example 1. So it says, let me just see, the hypotenuse is radical 2 times the leg. So the hypotenuse is 6. It is equal to radical 2 times the leg. So let's get the a by itself by cancelling out what we have next to it. Divide each side by radical 2. So a would be equal to 6 over radical 2. But this is not a rational number. This is an irrational number because we have a radical in the bottom of the fraction. That means we need to cancel it out. This is how we do it. We times the numerator and denominator by that radical number. So we had radical 2 in the bottom. We time each of these numbers by radical 2. So at the top, what we have is 6 times radical 2, like this. In the denominator, we have radical 2 times radical 2, or 2, because this is what you get when you time these two numbers. So now, on the outside of that radical, we have 6. 6 and 2 are like terms. They can be cancelled out. 6 over 2 is 3, and then we have radical 2. This is the first method of solving this question. The second method is like this. Let me just solve it over here. Method 2. For example 2. So since we have a for the legs, we can square them. A squared plus a squared equals the hypotenuse squared. The hypotenuse is given 6. On the left hand side, we have two of these. We have 2a squared. On the right hand side, 6 squared is 36. Get the a squared by itself. Divide each side by 2. So a squared equals 36 divided by 2 is 18. Take square root of each side. A would become, sorry, there was a 1 here. A would become radical 18. If you simplify it, you get 3 radical 2. Choose whichever method you want to choose, either the first method or the second method. Here we have 2 more examples. They look alike, but they're slightly different. For the first one, we have the length of the hypotenuse. It is 25. So let's just plot it. An isosceles right triangle, or 45, 45, 90 degrees triangle. The hypotenuse is 25. The legs are the same. So this is what we have. So remember, when you time one of the legs by radical 2, you should get the length of the hypotenuse. This is the equation that we need to solve. So if we divide each side by radical 2, the value of a would be 25 divided by radical 2. But since we have a radical in the bottom, we need to get rid of that radical 2 by multiplying the numerator and denominator of the fraction times radical 2 times radical 2. So at the top we have 25 times radical 2. In the bottom we have 2. So this would be the length of a, 25 times radical 2 divided by 2. Deal with the last one. Still we have 45, 45, 90 right triangle or isosceles right triangle, whichever you want to use. One of the legs is 14 centimeters. So here, what kind of triangle we have? The legs are 14. The hypotenuse is a question mark. So let's say the hypotenuse is x. The value of x, or the hypotenuse, would be equal to the legs times radical 2. So this is it. We don't need to solve anything like we did in these questions, because the given side was the hypotenuse for this one and the previous example. But for this one, the legs are given. If the legs are given, all you need to do is multiplying the leg by radical 2 to get the value of hypotenuse, guys. The second part of the lesson is about properties of 30, 60, 90 degrees triangles. This is another common triangle in geometry. So the first example explains us what kind of things that we have in 30, 60, 90 triangle. So I will really need you to focus on this question because it will require you to pay more attention than the previous ones. So please make sure you're on task and then listen very carefully. So it says the hypotenuse is twice the shorter leg. In 30 degrees, 60 degrees, 90 degrees triangle, the hypotenuse is twice the shorter leg. Here's the hypotenuse. It is given 2x. The shorter leg is given x. As you see, it is 2 times the shorter leg. So we have nothing to do with that part. What we need to do is we need to show that the longer leg, which is given as a, is radical 3 times the shorter leg. So this is what we need to show. The longer leg is equal to radical 3 times the shorter leg. The shorter leg was x. So we need to figure this one out by using the Pythagorean theorem. Because since we have a right triangle here, it must satisfy the Pythagorean theorem. So when we square the legs, the first leg is a, we are going to square this, plus the second leg is given x, square this one, equal 2x squared. And then now we need to solve this for a. We are going to get this by itself to see if we have this equation. Now the left hand side is done. These are not like terms, so we deal with this part. 2x squared is 2x times 2x. So let me do it on the side. 2x times 2x is, multiply the numbers, you get 4. X times x is x squared. So we have 4x squared. On the right hand side of this equation is what we have is 4x squared. The left hand side is a squared plus x squared. Now as you see, these two are like terms since they have both x squares. We subtract x squared on each side to cancel this one out. Left hand side is a squared, right hand side is, we have 4x squared, we subtract 1x squared, and then in the end we get 3x squared. Now we need to get rid of this. What we need is the value of a. So square root of each side gives us, left hand side stays as a, right hand side is this, radical 3 times x squared. So we can separate this. So the right hand side can be separated as radical 3 times radical x squared. So radical 3 stays the same, but this part right here can be simplified. Radical x squared means since these two are opposite of each other, they will cancel out. We are going to end up with x for the value of a. So do you see that what we have is the same as that? If you don't, you can write it as, instead of radical 3 times x, you can switch them around. The value of a would be x times radical 3. So yes, we showed that the longer leg is radical 3 times the shorter leg. We are done with this question. This is basically what kind of relationship we have in this type of triangle, 30, 60, 90 degrees. The hypotenuse is 2 times the shorter leg, and then the longer leg is radical 3 times the shorter leg. That is the relationship that we need to keep in our minds. So let's move on. In a 30 degrees, 60 degrees, 90 degrees right triangle, the hypotenuse is 5 centimeters. So let's just draw it out. 30 degrees, 60 degrees, 90 degrees, the hypotenuse is 5 centimeters. Find the length of the other two sides of the triangle. So remember, the hypotenuse is 2 times the shorter leg. Here's the shorter leg. 2 times this leg must be equal to 5. So let's say the shorter leg is a, and then the longer leg is going to become radical 3 times a, because that is what we just figured out. The longer leg is going to be radical 3 times the shorter leg. And I know that if I time the shorter leg, or a, by 2, I get the length of the hypotenuse. So the shorter leg was a, I put a here, I timed it by 2 to get the value of hypotenuse. Now we solve it for a. Divide each side by 2. A would be 5 over 2, or you can say 2.5. But I would prefer leaving it like this, because the longer leg is equal to shorter leg times radical 2. Radical 3, sorry, 5 over 2 times radical 3. Or we can rewrite it as 5 radical 3 over 2. So this would be the length of the longer leg. Here's the length of the shorter leg. The hypotenuse was given. We are done with this question. I guess we can move on to the next one. Here we have 3 more questions, guys. Especially the first one is a very good question. So let's draw what it says. It says an equilateral triangle. So I'm going to draw out an equilateral triangle, at least something that looks like an equilateral. So these angles are 60 degrees. I don't want to put 60 degrees to that angle because of the word that I saw right here. It says has an altitude length of 36 feet. So the altitude of this triangle is the height of the triangle, which is a straight segment from the top of the triangle to the bottom. So its length is given 36 feet. The angle at the top is divided into 2 equal pieces now, 30 degrees and 30 degrees. Determine the length of a side of the triangle. So we are going to figure out one of these lengths. They are all equal to each other, but we are going to figure out one of them by using either this triangle or that triangle. Both of them are exactly identical. They are 30, 60, 90 degrees triangles. Across from 60 degrees, the side that we have is 36. So remember the relationship that we have. The length of the longer leg is equal to shorter one times radical 3. This is what kind of equation we have. Now let's plug in what we know. We know that one of the sides is 36 degrees, but which one? Longer leg or shorter leg? So if you look at the triangle, it is visible that 36 is the longer, but we need to compare the angles. Across from 30 degrees, we have the shorter leg. Across from the 60 degrees, we have the longer leg. So longer leg is given 36 feet. Let's plug in 36 for the longer leg. It equals, let's say, S for shorter leg times radical 3. We need to solve this equation for S. We need to cancel this one out. The operation we have is multiplication. We need to do its opposite. Divide each side by radical 3. These two canceled out. Left hand side of the equation is 36 divided by radical 3. Right hand side is S, or the shorter leg. Now we need to cancel out this radical 3 in the bottom because it makes it an irrational number. So time each side of this by radical 3. Now this part becomes 36 radical 3. 36 radical 3. The bottom becomes radical 3 times radical 3 is equal to 3. The right hand side is S. Now we have like terms. 36 divided by 3 is 12. Radical 3 stays the same, is the length of the shorter leg. So now I know that this side here is 12 radical 3. What do I know about the hypotenuse? Hypotenuse is equal to 2 times shorter leg. So plug in the length of the shorter leg and time it by 2. 12 radical 3. So 2 times 12 is 24. You're going to time it by radical 3 for the length of the hypotenuse. So the second side of the triangle, or one of the sides of the triangle actually, is 24 times radical 3. So all of these sides, this one is 24 radical 3, this one is 24 radical 3. This whole thing is going to be 24 radical 3 because this half is 12 radical 3. This half is going to be the same, 12 radical 3. So I guess we are done with the question. Let me see. Determine the length of a side of the triangle. Yeah, we are done with the question. Let's move on to the last two examples. We have 30, 60, 90 degrees triangle for this one. Across from 30 degrees, we have X. This is the shorter leg. This one is the hypotenuse. We have the longer leg here. So remember the equations. Longer leg equals shorter times radical 3. Now, we know the longer leg, it is given 12, equals shorter times radical 3. Divide each side by radical 3. Now, shorter leg is 12 divided by radical 3. So if you simplify it, you're going to get the length of the shorter leg is equal to 4 radical 3. Please make sure you figure this one out by using the same method that I did in right here. And when we know the length of the shorter leg, we can figure out the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is equal to shorter times 2. So the shorter leg is 4 radical 3. We're going to time this by 2. The like terms are 4 and 2. We multiply them. We get 8 times radical 3. For the hypotenuse, so y equals 8 radical 3. X equals 4 radical 3. This one right here is equal to 4 radical 3. So let's move on to the next one. The hypotenuse is given. If the hypotenuse is given, it is a little bit easier. Hypotenuse is equal to shorter leg times 2. Hypotenuse is given 20. Plug in 24h equals 2 times shorter leg. Now get the s by itself by dividing each side by 2. So the length of the shorter leg is equal to 10. So this angle is 30 degrees. The shorter leg must be this one right here. So y equals 10. Remember, the longer leg equals shorter times radical 3. The shorter leg, we just figured it out. It was 10 time it by radical 3. There's nothing to simplify in this, so the longer leg is equal to 10 radical 3. And we are done with the lesson, guys. Please comment below if you have any kind of questions. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in another video.